Well, it's all quiet on the Houston front now, you could say. There it is. Look.
And we have received confirmation that the crew module and the service module have successfully separated, and we are getting a truly magnificent view, although it is only for a brief moment.
But when I watched my recording later, it came out wrong, because I didn't quite catch that part when I was away from the studio. I just realised the crew were asking to name craters on the moon after integrity, and that's when it hit me. Since integrity perhaps is meant to symbol a political value, you know, like now it's us with such high morals who are to claim craters on the moon, right? I got that impression, and then I just went and fetched myself a cup of coffee. So when I came back, I thought they had just continued in the same way, but then they had switched over to that other naming thing. That sensitive topic there with his wife. But it was, you know, it was right. It became one of those highlights. So it was a beautiful moment. He himself even said it, you know. He, the husband of the late Carol, he himself said that it was one of those, a truly beautiful moment. And I felt the same way. It was really one of those times where we were all just human beings together. I don't think anyone who watched it, I believe that few who watched it at that time were not deeply affected. I mean, if you're an adult and normal in the head, you know. Yeah, I just that was such a beautiful moment. And you could tell it wasn't planned at all, and he almost couldn't keep it together. You know, these guys, they're all macho, you know, fighter pilots, and really, really tough types. And then you noticed they broke apart. He couldn't even read it himself. The husband and he, then his partner, that Canadian fellow. I can't recall his name, but the Canadian. He was the one who was given the assignment to present this suggestion regarding names. And then now this name. The more I truly thought about it, it was an incredibly beautiful and poignant moment. And even though it was quite sorrowful, it was more like, my goodness, it was... They were no longer robots, so to speak, but it didn't last long. It was only 20 seconds later, and they just had to keep going, right? But then there was the fact that they themselves said it was a beautiful moment, wasn't it? And I completely agree with that. Then the other really significant moment was when they arrived at behind the moon. Yes, I can now go off topic a little again here. Now we'll just have to wait approximately, okay then, about 10 minutes. Well, yes then, in those minutes behind the moon, that's when it becomes critical, those minutes when they completely lose all contact with Earth. Yes, and then there was that time when they got to the far side of the moon and took those pictures we saw earlier. They also said it was apparently a truly enormous moment to be on the far side there and see the moon is much bigger than the sun and things like that. So just think how many times you've seen the solar systems in books and things like that, and on a screen. But to physically be there and have it right in your face like that, I can only imagine. Or no, that's what they said. They said they were surprised, even though they knew they were going there, and were probably mentally prepared for it. But even the crew said that you wouldn't be able to describe it. However, what was quite interesting about that situation was that it also was at its most hectic when they were behind there. They certainly weren't on the far side there just to look around. I mean, to travel for the experience. Perhaps that might happen in the future, but they were there to take photographs and map the terrain. So they really had to work fast. It was the most hectic period considering the very short time they had at their disposal. But they said they took a break together for about 3 or 4 minutes, where they took out some biscuits and shared some cookies and just had a personal shared experience, you know. I don't really believe my own conspiracy about Washington when we were discussing how NASA headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. However, That's probably what I'm reacting to comes from at NASA. That whole thing with the manipulation and so on. As I said before, I actually believe what the situation is. The simple truth is most likely that they are afraid of the Fermi paradox. They've surely considered the paradox because the vast majority, they believe in the paradox. If you look at interviews with scientists and such, almost everyone agrees that Enrico Fermi was indeed correct, and his paradox has actually proven even more accurate as we've gathered more data about the universe. Enrico said this back in the 1950s. But the more we've learned about the universe's development, it has only gained even more significance, because we're finding out that these first solar systems started even earlier, so potential life in the universe has had even more time to develop, meaning he's even more correct now. So very few people disagree. Most people agree that it's completely realistic, so probably there are other life forms in the universe and they would have evolved earlier than us, being about 10 billion years ahead of us. And then Enrico Fermi poses the Fermi paradox. Why don't we see them? Because we should have seen them. But I think that's also what NASA's been considering, that they are afraid of being stopped. Imagine that all the others in the universe were stopped. Now we'll do everything not to be stopped, and then they've become a bit overzealous, right? That stuff with the kids and all that business. So they're employing all the tactics from what they've learned about democracy during their psychology studies and how you're meant to get the majorities to back their project. I think it's more that it's not some kind of Thelema cult setup, that it has a more normal explanation for it. But I think they are doing something like that. But I think the real reason is just that they're worried about the Fermi paradox. That they're going to try to get out to conquer space and suspect there will always be internal quarrelling within that civilization. So they're trying to do everything not to be stopped. That is what I believe is actually the reason for all of that. Yes, but I have to say, after I began focusing on NASA, that was due to the 3 Atlas comet. I was completely obsessed with 3 Atlas because it behaved as I had predicted in 2024 in the approach theory. It behaved in a manner consistent with how it displayed the predicted behaviour, isn't that right? From the Fermi life forms and so on. So I was completely engrossed in Atlas 3, so to speak, or I thought, oh my gosh. Now it's becoming yet another time I've gotten confirmation, right? On the fact that the theory might be correct. And then in October 2025, the whole thing began. Then NASA started to hold back the images from when 3I Atlas passed Mars. When 3 Atlas was set to pass Mars, NASA was sitting on exclusive photos that could reveal more details about what 3 Atlas truly was. Wow. Look. Yes, they made it through. Look at this. Look at this. Now it's the parachutes we're waiting for. First comes the windshield, and then the parachutes appear.
The pyros are armed for forward bay coverage, Edison. And now the initial series of parachutes are deploying, and we are now relying on the drogues. And Houston, we're visual 2 drogues out the window.
These are absolutely stunning images.
Next up.
We copy. We have the...
Up next, we'll see the pilot parachutes deploy, which will then pull out the larger main chutes. It's almost time for our splashdown. We're looking at 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Yes, that was a brave thing to do. There's nothing that can ever take that from them.
In terms of flight dynamics,
On 2 drogues.
we see it on board.
When it comes to the NASA curse. According to the theory on the Fermi life forms, it means it's not them they're looking for.
We are currently passing through 10,000 feet, and the drogue parachutes are still deployed.
So I'm saying that it could indicate they're not quite so desperate then, because if things had really exploded with this crew here, I would have felt that they were angry, and a little bit out of control. Oh, look there. Look at that.
Main chute deploy.
We're at 5,000 feet.
5,000 feet.
Recovery is only possible because of integrity.
Take a look at this.
And we have 3 good main chutes.
Oh my goodness, imagine the feeling that they must have right now.
The 3 main chutes are good, the reefing is good, the descent rate is good.
And we see 3 very good-looking parachutes.
We've just gone from 40,000 kilometers an hour. Oh my goodness. It makes you a bit proud to be a human, man.
Cabin pressure indicates no need for hydrazine checks.
Integrity copies.
This is a truly perfect descent for the ship Integrity, and its crew sounds quite hale and hearty. It's all safe on board.
Yes. So, regarding the NASA curse then. So much has happened, even after January 27th. So I feel that what I'm most interested in now is whether they are pinpointing, right?
Integrity is now completing a journey of 694,481 miles, which began with its launch from the Kennedy Space Center on April 1st, including a trip around the moon.
So what might have triggered the actual NASA curse itself? Because that crew there, they are, after all, completely innocent, aren't they? In addition, they are brave and should be far from zero risk. They should be far from triggering the signal, far from being willing to trigger zero risk, most likely. However, an explosion. That would have been a very strong statement, wouldn't it? But the more I thought about this, I can clearly see now that it would almost have been worse if it had exploded, because then I would have felt that the alien life forms, if that particular theory is correct, then
Passing through 1,000 feet.
they were desperate, weren't they? Because then they start killing people they don't really want to and so on. So the kind of thing that's happening now on the ground and around NASA, people getting killed and going missing and all sorts of weird things like that, that's more what perhaps is a more likely response. If it's more like, I'm not saying now, but it's others who have also noticed this in the media, I see more and more people are starting to discuss it now. All the things that have happened at NASA with these scientists and such. And that was what episode 3 in February covered. I'm very careful with accusations there, but I did bring it up in those 45-minute episode 3. Wow, there it hits the water.
We have a confirmed splashdown, and we are now waiting on the VLDR data. The splashdown has been officially confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, which is 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time.
From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity astronauts are back on Earth.
Yes, back on Earth, as you say. I actually keep forgetting that I'm on the air right now.
Reports, the vehicle is stable and operating nominally. We will still be deploying the crew module's uprighting system to maintain that orientation. A perfect bullseye splashdown for Endeavour.
At this point, there isn't really much more to look at. I know the rest of it now, so to speak. What happens next is that, in an hour, they'll come out of the hatch.
But I have to admit, you really do get a little proud to be human in such a moment. But about the NASA curse and that Telemasect conspiracy thing, I think it's important to have someone like me, for instance. I'm perfect for that since I have a theory behind it. We need to know, right? We can't just take everything for granted. We can't just say, oh, okay, NASA, if you say so, then it's fine. We can't just accept NASA's claim they are doing this to help us. The consequences of being lied to this time around are so incredibly extreme. But I don't think it's all that strange that they're trying to fake things and such, simply because of the Fermi paradox. They're just afraid of being stopped. And you notice it, for example, during that marathon broadcast on the pre-show there. So being up all night, the entire night, showing the live images from Florida. Then you saw that they didn't have any floodlights on the rocket, right? It seems as if they're afraid someone might do something, that they're anxious all the time. If you're following the press conference and things like that, you'll see that there are always these guards standing around to make sure that nothing bad happens. And then there's that whole thing, that NASA started, this idea where you can actually have your name put on a small chip that goes along on the space mission and all that kind of stuff. You understand, who's most interested in it. I find it quite exciting. It's the children, isn't it? And those psychopath psychologists, right? Like let's say Jack Parsons had been a psychologist, or for example, Ted Bundy, that serial killer. He was actually going into psychology, So, right? I wonder if psychology might just attract a lot of those kinds of completely bonkers, truly crazy individuals, but who are also incredibly intelligent. Because in that situation, you can operate and be truly awful without anyone ever realizing it, especially if you're also smart, because then if they start to learn in detail how the brain functions, they can truly begin to manipulate our brains, which I've talked about quite a bit before. So I think it's important that we at least are allowed to talk about it. It was back in October when NASA withheld the images from 3 iAtlas. That was the first time I started thinking, what's up with NASA? What is it? I started to think maybe they're going to discover what 3 iAtlas was for themselves and not just holding on to the images for 43 days. That they took the images into their own research and began to scrutinize the images because they wanted to understand what this interstellar object was. But on the surface, they just laugh off that whole 3 iAtlas thing. And the management of NASA seemed to be laughing it off, the question of what 3 iAtlas was and so on. No, haha, it's just a regular comet, right? I mean, that is completely idiotic behavior from their side. And you meant to bring up Avi Loeb again. He has been sort of the figurehead from Harvard and his team, and he completely agrees, and I completely agree with him. To be in the space exploration industry and to claim those things when interstellar objects actually appear. Just laugh off interstellar objects. That's just insane, no matter how you look at it. But for my theory, those interstellar objects are important. I have written an entire article just on that. My mini article 1 from last fall is proposing specifically how interstellar objects are used to communicate. Because when interstellar objects arrive, excuse me for a moment, it's not that interesting to watch the ocean. It's still an hour before anything happens. It's going to be a full hour before it begins. This is not something that's very exciting to watch. But I'll be keeping a very close eye on this situation. But at least we definitely know the situation. Now the crew just needs to get themselves out of that hatch. Well, because the whole thing with interstellar objects, it is truly quite unique. As I write in my mini articles 1 and 2 as well, it's because if there exists extraterrestrial life, let's say there exists a life form very, very far away that somehow manages to control objects within our solar system or within our galaxy, it could be very probable that they are utilizing interstellar objects. That would indeed be an absolutely perfect method to communicate from the outside. Because if some unusual object now enters our solar system from outside, if it were to carry information, that information must come from an alien life form out there, because we certainly can't be sending in these interstellar objects ourselves. They arrive at enormous speeds, at unique angles, don't they? They just come right in from the outside. Well, before I continue, I need to address something. Last time we were discussing how many planets there were in our solar system. I just guessed around 20-something. But officially there are 8. But then it's a question of how you define it, because there are these planets and many moons and such things. It's a question of how we define it then. But if someone asks you how many planets there are in our solar system, you should answer 8. But actually there are hundreds if you were to include all those moons and smaller objects and things like that. Just so that we're clear on this then. Yes, but you see there are comets and similar objects within our solar system. And these comets, they do have specific orbits that they adhere to, precisely because they are indeed part of the solar system itself. So if one of them were to come and crash into our Earth, they would behave very predictable. They would just come a little bit out of their established orbit before they would near Earth. But when it comes to interstellar objects, they simply arrive from a completely different direction. And I also think they travel at higher speeds. But they at least come from a completely different angle. So that's how they detect them on their screens. Because first the object is one dot among many dots. And then they see that this one dot just comes from a completely different angle. That's how they know it has to be an interstellar object. Anyway, for NASA to almost ignore them, I think that's very strange. It really started with NASA ignoring the first observed incoming object in 2017. Oumuamua looked almost like this pen here. We have never seen this shape in space before, ever. We haven't seen this before. You know, comets and meteorites and such usually tend to have a kind of some kind of round shape then, at least. But the interstellar incoming Oumuamua in 2017 had a width-length scale of 1 to 10. It's not quite like this pen, but it had that ratio of width to length, 1 to 10. So it almost looks like such a large part of a ballpoint pen then. So it just came fluttering in, that's all. That was really strange. My God, we've never seen anything like it before. What I thought was that it looks like the number 1. So it meant it was the first interstellar object we could observe. Oumuamua was the first, one in, as in the number 1. You see, Oumuamua actually was the very first interstellar object detected in midair. They have a system for these objects. They number them I1, I2, I3, and so this first one was I1. But its more common name was Oumuamua, which means a messenger from afar, named from Hawaii, because it was discovered from there, which is near to the splashdown site, actually. It's not that far. Well, it is quite a ways off, but it's not that far from Hawaii. It's right outside San Diego in California, you see. But we saw it on the map earlier, so it's very much like all of this that we're talking about is quite centrally located around that area, both with all that, with Los Angeles and Telma and NASA, and even Oumuamua, because Oumuamua was discovered from Hawaii, which isn't that very far from there. So just the fact that it arrived in that particular form was really strange, I thought, and Avi Loeb also felt the same way. And if I hadn't had Avi Loeb and his team to lean on, I would have simply been dismissed as just some internet quack, as some people tend to call it. So that's why it's incredibly valuable to have the support of Harvard researchers who I've become extremely grateful for Harvard's involvement in this, because the officials could all have simply thrown itself into NASA's stand, hidden themselves with NASA, you could say. Wait, now we see the ship beginning to approach the capsule, but this whole thing is going to take some time. When I think about it, Chistina's coming out then. It would be quite nice to see her again, emerging out of the capsule. Well, so just so that, because it really does make quite a big difference if I'm just sitting here alone saying it, and that I can document that there are also other researchers, prominent, really brilliant researchers, you know. If you're a professor at Harvard, then you're not just a professor, then you are, how should I compare that then? Well, it's, I believe Harvard is probably ranked as number 1. It's ranked as number 1 in the whole wide world, the university, globally, in the entire world. You can just imagine, you know, now you have a place like Oslo University, and they're like in the 60th, 70th position or something like that. It's the highest one that we have up here in the Nordics or something like that. Or wait, I believe it's Stockholm University, actually. Yeah. That's what I am most proud of, actually. Stockholm University. It is actually considered the highest ranking around here. But even Stockholm University, you can actually check this yourself. I looked it up a couple of years ago, and it was, even Stockholm University is perhaps in 15th place, or maybe 14th, 15th place. But Harvard is like number one. It has been that for a very long time, and it has a whole bunch of Nobel Prize winners and things like that. So that the support comes from Harvard, that's what I've truly learned. I've learned to appreciate that, and also learned that when I've engaged in this debate out here on the internet, that this is a very politically charged, I mean, it's a very sensitive topic. So like, yeah, and then I have to admit I am, a little bit disorganized, right? So, for instance, during the live broadcast, I sometimes say things a little bit incorrectly. For example, that whole thing about the age of the moon last time. But if there is a season 2 in this podcast, I believe I'll be bringing Grok along on my mobile phone. That way, every time a point comes up where I'm not entirely certain, I'll just ask Grok live on air, so Grok can tell us. Because then I don't have to guess wildly. Like last time, for example, I had to guess how old the moon was. And I looked it up afterwards. I guessed 10 billion years, just to say something. But the truth is, 4.5 billion years. The moon is approximately 60 million years older than the formation of the solar system. It wasn't quite close now, but you understand. But if these people out there, if they're just looking for such things, they'll say, oh, he doesn't even know how old the moon is, right? And haha, then he can't be anything. I mean, it seems they use every single little chance to undermine you. And that's why I've started bringing those diplomas into the studio. Because might also claim, no, he has no education. They just say it, even if they know you are educated. They just say it to undermine you, right? No, he's not educated. And then the listeners have to spend, they'd have to spend many years before they might figure out that I actually was educated, right? So I just bring it to the studio to have it, just document it once and for all.
But it's somewhat similar. I really appreciate it that I'm not alone in this way of thinking. Because it means that I am able to rely on truly skilled people who say and who think the same way. So I can't really say it often enough, actually, how glad I am for that. Because I think about if he and Harvard had also jumped on that NASA thing saying, no, it's nothing. It's just nothing to care about. Why should we care about anomalies in interstellar objects? And if you hear interviews with Avi Loeb, he's actually angry for the attitude such researchers have, as if they don't want anything new to happen. And I don't mean to be bitchy now, but Avi Loeb, he actually said that when he was on Joe Rogan. It was that when they have conferences together and such. I'm not trying to be bitchy and gossip right now, but I think it's quite important and I should bring it up. And it's about what Avi Loeb has overheard. When these experts from various universities are holding conferences about Oumuamua, when they come together and, evaluate what it was, and they observed together that there were quite special things going on. For example, it had a very strange shape, didn't it? It looked like this pen almost. We have never seen this shape in space before. Neither meteorites or comets. And there were other things too. For example, they calculated that the incoming object suddenly changed speed and so on, so they couldn't explain why or things like that. There are several little things like that. But Loeb was saying on Joe Rogan then that it was a colleague there. It's a bit mean to gossip. I don't really like that, but I think it's important to say this. I'm not saying any names, but just that a real scientist in those circles who hangs out with Avi Loeb and professors at Harvard can say, I wish that interstellar object had never come. You understand, right? So it's that reluctance to introduce anything new now that I'm starting to interpret it a bit more in a political direction, that it has something to do with that whole chaos thing, that it's back to the thelema concepts with Jack Parsons and the Marxist globalist ideas from episode 4, perhaps the Epstein situation, and how they were all connected. It's the very same thoughts, you see. And this whole concept of chaos is important because the question of chaos is pivotal in the fourth law of thermodynamics and the Paradise Machine model, because evil traits must take control of the natural chaos. But I must again remind everyone that when I talk about this, no human can be very evil according to the same theory. Okay. But we also need to have that debate there as well, so that we can be angry at one another and things like that. I believe if, for example, that Paradise Machine model is truly correct, then I don't think we should bother ourselves so much with us being angry at each other. All this bickering and wars and things we're doing now. Because if that paradise state is true for all eternity, then we'd be foolish to care about what we were doing down here on Earth, because we are just humans. For instance, that vulnerable moment that revealed itself up there on Orion where suddenly we just start crying. We're just so vulnerable as we've just been thrown into this game. As I've said before on the podcast, I look at it as if we've been thrown into a game we never asked to be a part of. And so we simply have to adapt to the brutal rules that exist in nature, in the struggle for survival game. It's logic for us to be desperate, even if you try to pretend you're relaxed and cool. But no human is cool like that. I think deep down we're actually really scared. And we really should be quite afraid because, the context we live in is utterly brutal, isn't it? It's quite an uncomfortable situation, at least compared to being in eternal paradise. So if we're talking about head biotech, the ultimate goal is this, that if the theories prove to be correct, then there actually exists a place beyond the event horizon and black holes, where there is an eternal paradise, structured in a mathematical format, where we theoretically could be copied over. That's precisely what I'm referring to in that instruction video from 2021. During COVID, where I'm wearing the black beanie. I remember that was during COVID. Yes, that was right after I had written the third article in 2021. That video is located somewhere on one of the head biotech websites. Yeah, on Rumble, though, at least. That's the thing about it. I've actually dubbed that into English, but darn it, what was it I was just about to say? And then there's the thing that if the approach theory is indeed correct, if it is truly that they are on their way towards Earth right now, that is the Fermi life form I'm talking about, if they will come in flesh and blood. I just don't know, but it's this 100% love and intelligence state that they're getting closer and closer as they are gaining more and more control over us, simply because they have to. They know that someone has triggered zero risk, and for them, that should mean. If we don't put a stop to this, then the entire Paradise Machine will be completely inverted and transform into a hell machine instead, won't it? And that is precisely the reason why they are arriving. And that is also really the underlying cause of the NASA curse, because NASA started to interfere with their efforts to communicate using interstellar objects, just as my theory suggests they are attempting to do. It's really serious, isn't it? Maybe it's the first time they've met resistance, if the theory is correct. And that's the theoretical basis for the NASA curse. And then, when I think, this all started with NASA losing that MAVEN probe on Mars on December 6th. And then it was more and more, and so on. But now let's see. Is anything happening here now? We need to see them come out of the capsule. Yes, that is him indeed.
The Telma leader, to put it that way.
I'm not really supposed to say, but I will say this. I don't really care for that guy, to be honest. I will actually say it. Yes, he absolutely must know. I mean, he holds that important position there and he says nothing. He just plays along. That tells me that he's from that place, that very headquarters of NASA in Washington, D.C. That's where he's from. That's what I truly feel he is. If those particular people in Washington have a person that we can actually relate to, then it would have to be him. I'm certainly not suggesting that he isn't a pleasant person, but you can clearly see he's always trying to smooth things over. Hence, as I see it, he's represent that manipulation that's pushing from behind. And he's not interested in trying to even address this topic. I'm also wondering if it was him who also talked about 3I Atlas. That thing with 3I Atlas, they just laughed at it, I don't remember, but one of the NASA leaders ridiculed 3I Atlas last year. Let's see, where exactly was I? Oh, right, that whole thing about the first object in 2017, Oumuamua. Well, and about the thing, oh yes, okay. Oh, right, about that paradise thing, wasn't it? So if the Fermi life form, then if that's really correct, then it's only when there is absolutely no risk that they can proceed toward Earth. Since they can't accept evil traits to get the upper hand in the universe, but there are meant to be only a small number to have triggered the zero-risk signal. I'm not saying they're going to hell or anything like that, but I'm saying that the machine might be designed that way, and that's why there's no point in achieving zero risk if the consequence is just that. It's the principle of justice in the machine's design then, if this is, let's say, a type of quantum machine. That's essentially the Paradise Machine model, isn't it? You can picture it that way because it seems like the machine is designed around a quantum world, where they hide behind the quantum world, as discussed in the 5th article last fall. So if they size you up and measure that you are planning to send them all straight to hell, and that you really do, since they can prove it mathematically, then it's true, right? If everything is to be fair, even though it's horrible that someone goes to hell and all, then it's fair that you go to hell, isn't it? Let's just say it's like a cold computing machine then. So it's good to know about this theory that it would be wise to take 2 steps back. That's my contribution to peace and even trying to save someone. And maybe, it's very difficult because I can't decide that, but it'll be up to the machine then. If the theory is correct. But if you are, if you're quite simply just too evil, then yes. But my impression is that there aren't too many of them. Most people are genuinely very kind and good at heart. You can almost just tell by how we react if someone, for example, if someone sees someone is about to fall off a mountain or something like that, then you'll see everyone will just try to save them. It's exactly as if it's deeply embedded within our very instinct to be helpful and to be kind. And so on. So if the Paradise Machine model is indeed correct, then I believe we can at least put that idea aside. Well, I think we'll forget the arguing thing quite quickly then, if we manage to prove the model, but that's my task right now in the process. The point is you have to consider the theory as more and more evidence comes to light. But if it's true, no one will be able to stop the evidence, as they will simply continue their approach. So what I'm wondering about now as we're beginning to wrap up this first season of the 45 podcast, it's going to be 10 episodes that are all about this NASA curse topic. So the next season would then possibly be in the year 2028, because by then Artemis 4 are scheduled to land on the moon, and then a whole lot of things might have taken place. And if it simply fades away and nothing further develops, then that theory will also be gone. Then the probability that the approach theory and all of this is correct also diminishes. But having seen as much as I have now, I have also calculated so-called p-values for it. What the probability is that this is random and so on, and not random and so on. And I believe I have some evidence here. And then what's happening now is possibly the NASA curse. These must be the most interesting thing that are going on now. Yes, at a practical level, you could say these things on the ground level. I simply notice that it is much talked about now. There are many scientists who simply vanish, especially within NASA. And then I need to be a little careful about bringing people's personal tragedies into these kinds of topics. But I would say that if the NASA curse is real, it would perhaps be a more natural way to respond, let's say, if the Fermi life form is trying to respond to NASA's provocation last fall, and that it would be more natural for them to respond with that level of detail. So people who, for example, were directly involved at that time last fall, if that was the situation, instead of blowing up that entire spaceship with what were supposed to be their friends inside. So that's what I mean. I believe that if something like that had truly occurred, then I would have considered that to be worrying. That would make me a little uneasy. But I can hardly do anything else other than to... I documented the Artemis 2 mission, I certainly did. I did precisely what I had planned and said I would do. It's just that there ended up being a few more episodes because the launch kept getting postponed over and over. It was initially postponed from February, then again until now, April. But now it has finally happened. So I believe I'm going to start wrapping up the entire 45 podcast, which will then officially become season 1. Just now, I'm not sure if it's particularly interesting to wait for the crew to step out of the capsule. And just look at Christina's smile, just think about that for a moment. After coming out of that capsule, finally we can meet up. Yeah, but I'm just thinking about what else is going to happen besides that. That would be fun, but I can watch it on my own time, right? It's not really something I need to cover, you know. Let's see now. And now they're about to go through the entire procedure of opening the hatch. Now you can clearly see they're approaching the capsule more and more. Yes, so that's the situation then.
But if there isn't a lot more happening with this NASA situation right now, then I don't think I'll be doing anything further with the podcast until perhaps 2028. And it's possible I won't even do it then. Who knows what could have happened during that time? Maybe I completely lost all my interest or something like that or whatever, but I at least managed to get this done, and it was exciting as well. The so-called NASA curse due to the 3I Atlas delay. Then we had December 6th, which came about 14 days after the delay, NASA's delay of the Atlas images. And it's that the UN started the global observation of 3 atlases 9 days before NASA lost contact with MAVEN. They shouldn't really like that either, right? They must always try to obtain their dominant zero-risk situation in the universe, or in the machine, if you like. The Paradise Machine model should be designed always to possess zero risk before they can make any new offensive action. So, if they are to take even one step closer to Earth, they must make sure it will be risk-free. They cannot advance a single step closer to Earth if not. Consequently, if this life form were to arrive here on Earth one day, let's imagine for a moment they actually come to Earth. Then there would have to be absolutely zero risk when they land, right? This is a good way to end Season 1. Season 1. When they arrive, I've never really spoken about, but it's rather fascinating, and that's the last thing I believe I speak about for now. Okay, I'll just wrap this up. The last thing I'll describe is their landing. That's not what's important in the theory, but I actually predict it in the approach theory. In the 2024 article, I actually predict how it will unfold. But it was the fact that the UN started this global observation on November 27th, just 9 days before NASA lost contact with MAVEN, when the so-called NASA curse is supposed to have started on December 6th. And then this second incident happened on January 27th, that NASA had to cut short their stay on the space station by 4 weeks. And then there was this third incident with the NASA plane that crash landed in Ohio, January 27th. It was right there in Houston, just next to the control center, at Johnson Space Center. That's where they operate in Houston, Texas. It's Ellington Airport. It's just 3 kilometers next to it. That's when I decided on January 27th, because that was the third incident. And that's when I started to prepare myself, because I wanted to document that Artemis 2 launch in case it was going to explode. Then I thought, if it really explodes, it's getting serious here. But then, well, but when I gave it a bit more thought, and this shows why it was actually okay to have this podcast, to share these thoughts all the way on how I think and how things developed, that an explosion would actually be a little misplaced. Because the more I reflected on it, to harm that crew and cause suffering, they shouldn't be their enemies at all, considering they're taking that risk. So I said that pretty early on. But then that whole thing with the scientist began. It's the murder of that NASA scientist that became the central point instead. And then suddenly it was like, oh, is this perhaps the direction they're actually heading in, isn't it? That the whole thing starts to become an internal matter right there within NASA itself. That perhaps those who were simply responsible for that delay and the deliberate withholding of information that was truly meant to provoke them. So it's just a speculation, but it feels like that's a more logic response. And then there's that SETI researcher who disappeared. That's what you see the other podcasts and media are reporting on now, so I don't know. There seem to be more people. The media reports that there are more who have vanished, including other lower-ranking scientists and such. So I haven't really delved into it, but I'll wait until something truly happens before I start a new episode. Then something truly substantial needs to happen. Otherwise, I'm pretty much putting season 1 to rest, so to speak. In that case, I'll simply wrap it up completely with these 10 episodes. So I'm going to conclude season 1 now by showing you these images from the capsule. While I'll use the last 3 minutes of this last episode to describe how they're going to land on Earth. Because it's quite interesting, if the theory is correct, and I actually believe it could be, then they are not in physical form behind the event horizon. They exist mathematically. They will live in a mathematical form, but with the features of 100% pure intelligence and love. Not in a biological form, but in an eternal mathematical form. But if they are on their way here and are going to take control here and so on, then I predict they might land in a physical form. This is not at the core of the theory, but their landing is described in the 2024 paper. By the way, look, they're approaching the capsule now. So, at the end of the paper, it suggests they will come in spaceships. If it happens, they'll probably come in spaceships. I mean, classic disc-shaped spaceships. The only reason for that is because they will probably... because their goal, you see, is not to make us afraid, right? They are supposed to be kind. The whole point is that they're only meant to wish us well. And the reason I suggest that they would come in those classic UFOs, it's simply because our culture, it would be the most reassuring for us to see something we've already witnessed on television countless times and such. So that's just the only reason I'm suggesting that if they were to appear in physical form and even land on Earth in spaceships like that, it's only because it's been shaped by our culture and it's what we've seen and are most familiar with, which will scare us the least because they don't want to scare us. So that's the only thing. But if it were to happen the day it happens, what I suggested in mini article 2 last fall was that they could arrive in 100 years, but let's say 60 years, let's say 40 years, 50, I don't know. But if it's true that, perhaps we've seen the first signs that a life form is heading towards Earth. So if that's right, let's say in 10, 20 years from now, the other scientists on Earth will start to agree. Yes, now we can also see it, because then we can prove it. with statistics and such, that these signs are growing stronger and stronger and stronger. But it's quite natural that I'm the first one to see the signs. But if I am truly correct and it gains consensus, as they say in the scientific world, then the question is, then it will probably be accepted in fact, but it will take time. Well, back to that particular day when they land. That day on Earth, when all the people on Earth can see them for the first time, see them arriving then in these spaceships, then everyone on Earth will know that they're coming to paradise and things like that, because then everything will be proven and then everyone will be 100% certain if it were to happen then. So that is the day. When that happens, it will be a quite incredible day. And imagine if we get, or let's say it happens in 30 years then. 40 years. Let's say we're still alive. Imagine if we get to experience that. And to meet another life form in that particular way, that is, the ultimate consequences of the approach theory. But as it stands right now, I'm simply trying to analyze this and trying to get a few more people to understand it. Maybe. Okay. If not, then I must have forgotten to say something. Yes, there's probably something I forgot to mention, but I believe I've said most of what I wanted, and I think I managed to cover approximately what I aimed for. Well, no, but you know what? So, what time is it now? Okay, that's been quite enough. I've been at it for 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's a good time to split this into 2 episodes. So we'll have episode 9 and episode 10. So this is episode number 10, and it marks the conclusion of episode number 10, and also the very end of our first season for the podcast, which is known by the name 45 Podcasten in Norwegian. However, when translated into English, it is called The 45 Show. I'd like to thank you again for your attention, and I wish everyone a continued pleasant night.